1 second here. Sorry. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so this agenda item is something that we're required to do at least every 30 days or as long as we have a meeting. So at the beginning of the pandemic, certain provisions of the Brown Act were temporarily suspended due to COVID. And the provisions that suspended those provisions expired on October 1st, 2021, and were replaced by Assembly Bill 361, which amended the Brown Act. And under these new rules, a Brown Act body can continue to meet virtually if its members find that, or during a declared state of emergency, if state or local officials have imposed or recommended measures to promote social distancing. So because we are still in a declared state of emergency, and because we have state and local recommendations for social distancing measures, as long as this board approves the attached resolution, we can continue to meet virtually.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any action that our board needs to take?
Yes, you need to adopt the resolution that's attached to in the agenda package.
I hear a motion.
You would just adopt the recommended action.
Okay.
I'll move to, this is Al White, I'll move to adopt the resolution, finding as stated.
Okay, is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we moved and seconded the recommended action. Let's have a roll call, please.
Director McGarty?
Yes?
Director Crane is absent. Director White?
Yes.
Director LaRue?
Yes.
Director Navarez is absent. Director Robinson?
Yes.
Thank
Okay,
you. Motion carries unanimously.
Great. Next, we have Pledge of Allegiance. So, Michael, do you still remember it? Okay, you can lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, next we have the consent items, approval of minutes from the August 13th meeting, rather. Do I hear a motion, or is there discussion for corrections?
Move to approve the consent agenda minutes.
I'll make a second on that motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, we'll call for the question then.
Director McGarty?
Yes?
Director Crane is absent. Director White?
Yes.
Director LaRue?
Yes.
Director Navarez is absent. Director Robinson?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, next will be the approval of minutes from the October 21st, 2021 meeting. And just a note, Glenn is spelled with 2 N's. So just remember that when you're typing up minutes. Any discussion? I would entertain a motion if someone would like to approve the minutes.
No, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of October.
I'll second it.
Okay, let's call the question.
Director McGarty?
Yes?
Director Crane is absent. Director White?
Yes.
Director LaRue?
Yes.
Director Navarez is absent. Director Robinson?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Good. Well, next on our agenda is Action item 4A, presentation from Stantec Consulting Services and discussion on the communication and engagement plan update and planned stakeholder interviews. And I believe Marissa Perez-Reyes is here to present on this. Marissa, you have the
Yes.
floor.
Good afternoon, everybody. Give me just one moment here. I'm going to share my screen. All right, I believe it's up and running. Hi, everybody. My name is Marisa Perez-Reyes. My colleague, Emily Finnegan, is also on the line today. And you may recall seeing Kirsten Pringle at one of the previous meetings we had back in October. So the three of us make up the Stantec consulting team that is working to support the Ukiah Valley Basin with adopting the groundwater sustainability plan and carrying forward a few activities into the implementation phase. So our work is divided primarily into three main tasks, the first of which is well underway in terms of supporting the adoption of the groundwater sustainability plan. The second item here is we're going to be kicking that off coming next. So that's what this presentation is about. And then the last item here is about supporting public meetings and committee meetings, board meetings such as this, which is more continuous. So that first task, GSP adoption, we when the public comment period closed for the groundwater sustainability plan draft, our team read the comment letters that were submitted and sorted those into comment matrices that we then passed off to the Larry Walker and Associate team. The technical team then used those matrices to prepare responses to those public comments. So we are now working on summarizing the public comment responses and that process that we went through in the form of public comment summary, which will be included as an appendix to the final groundwater sustainability plan. Second main task, as I alluded to, we're just getting started. It'll be the main focus of today. We are preparing an update to the communication and engagement plan. Part of this effort will include conducting stakeholder interviews. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. So on the right of the screen here, you'll see the title page of the communication and engagement plan, or C&E plan, that was prepared back in February by Larry Walker and Associates, GEI, SCI, and the UC Cooperative Extension. That plan provided an overview of what the C&E strategies were for the GSP development process. For details on the very specific activities that were conducted, you can read the public public comment summary, that document that I alluded to before. So the update to the C&E plan will be a forward-facing document that builds on this plan, as well as the information in the GSP itself. The update to the plan will identify the specific C&E activities and strategies that the GSA will carry forward through the implementation phase. So using those existing documents as a starting point, we'll supplement this document with insights from the Technical Advisory Committee and other local stakeholders. Through that, we will gather your insights on what outreach strategies the GSA should prioritize during GSA implementation. So the stakeholder interviews. Our team at Stantec is scoped to conduct up to 12 interviews. Those can be either individual interviews or they can be small group interviews. And the goal of these is really to assess the effectiveness of existing outreach strategies, determine coordination opportunities with local agencies and organizations, understand preferred levels of stakeholder involvement during GSP implementation, identify stakeholders that may not have been engaged or maybe underengaged during the development, and understanding barriers to stakeholder engagement. So working with the limits of what there might exist to be in terms of outreach and engagement, one of the goals of these interviews is to really identify ways we can build off of work that's already underway to engage stakeholders in the community. So I'm going to share a little bit more about potential interviewees, as well as the timeline for these interviews. But before I advance onto that, I wanted to pause for questions. Can I clarify anything that I've shared with you so far?
Are there any questions?
Could you just remind us what the timeline is and if this all concludes before we do our final submission of our sustainability plan, or if this comes afterwards?
Yeah, so it's a little bit concurrent. So we don't actually have to submit this update before, like with the GSP itself. So you aren't constrained in terms of that timeline because there already is a communication engagement plan that's out there. So in terms of timeline, what we're looking at is scheduling these interviews for November, December, and hopefully we will have a plan draft ready in January. Actually, I can go ahead and pull up that slide really quick. We are going to be sharing those findings from the interviews with you guys at the January TAC and board meetings. And then ideally that will be around the same time that we'll have a draft of that update ready. But no, the timeline, it's not meant to be done by the time the GSP is submitted.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions before we move on?
Just remind me what the funding source is for your activities.
Yeah, so this is provided through the Department of Water Resources, facilitation support grants. So our contract, we're paid by the Department of Water Resources. So that's the funding source for this. In terms of the actual outreach strategies that we prioritize, that's fully up to the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. So the efforts that I just described here are paid for.
Thank you.
Great. I'm going to move forward here. So we had a productive conversation this morning with the Technical Advisory Committee, just to get some of their preliminary thoughts on this list of potential interviewees. Essentially, the group of interviewees that we're prioritizing are members of the Technical Advisory Committee themselves. We also spoke a little bit about some of the commenters that submitted letters during the public comment process, and we have plans to reach out to a few of those, specifically environmentally, the environmental beneficial user groups. So we will be reaching out to them. As we said, we have scope for 12 interviews. So this is already pretty close to that number. But if you have any feedback, we are open to that. And I'm not sure how much time we really have to get into it at this meeting, but certainly if you think there are any groups or organizations that you think we should be reaching out to, can follow up.
So I would think you'd want to hear from Mendocino County Farm Bureau.
Yes, Devin Jones is on this list here.
Okay, good. I see her there as ag representatives. All right, excellent.
Yes, thanks, Glenn. Are there any other groups or individuals that you think we should touch base with?
The Redwood Valley group is important. Maybe someone else on the board could make a suggestion about who in Redwood Valley you should be chatting with.
Glenn, I was hoping that maybe you might have a good contact with the MAC or with other groups in Redwood Valley, because we were having a hard time figuring out exactly who to reach out to.
Elizabeth this morning made a recommendation. I don't think she gave us the exact name yet, but we made a note to follow up with her for that contact point that she has.
So the chairperson of the Redwood Valley MAC is Dolly Riley, and I can give you her contact information.
Thank you, Glenn.
You know, the thing to understand about Redwood Valley is that as it goes to our plan is that there's a lot of domestic wells that are in shallow aquifers, and so And there's a lot of concerns about cannabis growers depleting these shallow aquifers. So that's something that they would definitely want to weigh in on.
Absolutely. All right, well, if after this presentation, somebody comes to mind, feel free, you can follow up with Michael or Amber, and they'll pass along that point of contact to us. So coming back to this schedule and next step point. So either myself or my colleague Emily Finnegan will be reaching out to these individuals to schedule interview sessions through the next month and a half, ideally wrapping up by the end of the year. Those findings will then be communicated back to you, the board, and the technical advisory committee, and we will draft that C&E plan update. If there are no more questions, I will turn it back over to Michael.
Are there any questions?
None here.
Okay, it's pretty straightforward. So we'll be looking forward to hearing what feedback you get, and glad you're doing it.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, so that moves us to action item B, which is receive reports from directors and have further discussion on member agency contribution commitments. Are there any reports from directors?
Willow, we didn't have a quorum. We met on Monday night, so we couldn't really vote on it. I do believe that they're leaning towards it, but you know, it wasn't an actual meeting. So Jared said that he was going to try and plan a real quick meeting sometime later in the week so that we could do this, because we know it's an urgent item to finish up.
Anybody else need to weigh in?
Yeah, I think I attended the IRWA meeting. Ross is on the IRWA board, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you guys, of course, you are not all the members. You can't speak for all the members. You can only
Right.
So you guys decided that you wanted to support this and that you were all going to go back to your individual boards. And
Right. I was speaking only of Willow. That I think that Willow is going to support it, but we haven't voted on it, so I can't.
Right, and the other districts will be voting on this as well. So there should be some kind of answer by the next month.
Okay.
If I may, through the chair, I believe that IRWA is the only board that we're waiting on. I believe at the last meeting, we got a positive commitment from both the city and the county, and from Russian River Flood Control District. And we received direction at the last meeting to send out invoices, which was done. And I don't believe that we've received any payments yet, but that was sent out just within the last couple of weeks. So that's to be expected.
Okay, any further discussion on this before we move on?
That's great that the invoices went out. I think the rubber is going to hit the road when people see those things, and we'll either get money or we'll get a response.
Is there any public comment on this agenda item? Right, well, barring none, we'll move on to the next, which is a review of proposal from Larry Walker Associates for preparation of a groundwater sustainability plan, first annual report. Consideration of recommendation to the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors, an amendment to Board of Supervisors Agreement number 18-104 with Larry Walker and Associates to prepare the report, and authorization of budget adjustments in an amount up to $15,000 to reimburse Mendocino County for the cost of the amendment to the agreement. Okay, so who is presenting?
I can present on this.
I think I.
Oh, Laura, did you want to introduce your proposal? You
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of things, and the way we created the proposal, and Amber will talk about it, is we look at the overdrafted basin that submitted the GSP plan in 2020. They already had to submit a couple of the yearly reports. So basically, what we did is looking at the level of effort that they put into that and what is going to be needed, and we try to just make a summary. Our goal is really to do it as much as possible as a good template for the first year, so that then you will not have to reinvent the wheel every year. So the first one is this April, and then we can move forward and have something that is already set up. We have some funding also through the grant, so that we will use for this template, and then the 15,000 are really just to wrap up the official April 1, 2022 report. So we just we spent some time looking through what's out there, what others have done, what's expected, and then put together our proposal.
What kind of things typically are required in an annual report?
So we need to include in the annual report all remember that we discussed about the representative monitoring points, the data, the key points in the monitoring network that are highlighted in the plans for which we need to keep tracking sustainability indicators. And so groundwater levels in terms of hydrographs, for example, but then we also need to create groundwater contour maps using the new data. And if there are stream gauges, obviously also stream hydrographs. And then for water quality, we need to report the current condition of water quality. And everything needs to be tracked against what we define as sustainable management criteria. So it's pretty much all the representative monitoring points that are in the GSP that we already discussed, and just wrapped up in a nice way. For subsidence, you remember that we just said that we will be using satellite data from DWR, so that's not a big effort. So hopefully we will set that up. So for the next years, it's gonna be an easy update. But yeah, this is how it looks like. So hydrographs for groundwater level, water quality, contour maps.
Okay, any questions from board members?
Laura, this is Zach. Do I understand the timeline here correctly? We're gonna submit our sustainability plan in a couple of months, and a couple of months after that, we submit our first annual report. Did I get that correct?
Yes, yes, I know. Everybody was wondering about it, but that's how it is. That's and I have to be honest. I heard also somebody from DWR saying that probably that was kind of probably should have not been like that, but it happened. So if you look at the 2020 overdrafted basin, they submitted the first report in April 2020. That's how it is.
Any other questions from
yeah,
board members?
I have a question. In like the scope of work, the task 2 data collection and understanding current conditions, it says LWA will prepare a data request and the GSA staff will provide all this information. This information is mostly already gotten, or is this a whole new set of activities?
So the idea is just that there are some data that we may have to request every year. For example, some of the pumping data, for example, or some of the data that we don't directly collect, like all the data that we got in the past for the city of Ukiah or whatever. So there might be, most of the data are already in the plan, so we have all of them. I think the reason why there is that sentence is that, or for example, the RCD goes out and collect the data. We now have a direct connection, so the RCD gives us data every time when they collect them, but it's not officially our data, so that we download. We may have to just make a request. That's it.
Okay, I was concerned that there was a lot of fresh activity for staff, of which we're pretty limited.
No, no, no. No, it's kind of already streamlined. Oh, and the other data for which we have to make a request are, if you remember, for water quality, we are using agencies that are already collecting water quality, doesn't matter what. So it's not that the GSA is adding extra effort. And so we will just have to gather those data from those agencies.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from board members? Questions or comments from the general public? All right, if there's no further questions or comments, then I would like a proposal to request the recommended action.
Move the recommended action.
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's have a roll call vote, please.
Director McGarty,
Yes?
Director Crane is absent, Director White,
Yes.
Director LaRue,
Yes.
Director Navarez is absent, Director Robinson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. So item D is the discussion and possible direction to staff on cost proposals from Mendocino County Resource Conservation District for quarterly and monthly groundwater elevation monitoring. So who is presenting on this? Deborah, are you here? Yes, you are.
I am.
Okay.
I can introduce this item. This was based on direction from the board at the last meeting, where it was requested that staff receive estimates from RCD for either quarterly or monthly monitoring, when we were discussing possibly switching from semi-annual to quarterly or monthly monitoring. So RCD has provided those and they're attached here for our discussion. There don't necessarily need to be any decisions made today. We can bring this back if there's some consensus on which way to go. But this is more just for discussion at this point.
And I just want to add that I included two different sets. One was just for the 16 wells, which is the subset I'm currently monitoring monthly. And then a second set that included an additional 10 instrumented wells. And the reason I included that is because earlier in the year, there had been a request from the water agency to give a cost for that as well. And I figured give you all the information, you can take it or leave it. But I wanted you to have all of it. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
The monitoring of the instrumented wells, these wells, are they currently instrumented?
Laura would be the person who could answer that question.
So currently there are only, so what we were discussing is currently we have 2 wells with continuous monitoring already ongoing. And then the new Department of Water Resources well that has been drilled will have continuous data. We were thinking about increasing that number as much as possible through the grant that we have right now so that we have more continuous data. It's gonna be, we discussed this also at the TAC meeting this morning. It's gonna be a step process because it will require sometimes, to reach out to the stakeholder, get the approval to install continuous data. So it's not something that can be done in 2 months. So it's a little bit longer process. So some of the wells are already with continuous data. Some are gonna be, for now, they will be just monthly. And maybe with the goal that sooner or later, they will all end up into continuous data.
So some of these wells haven't even been constructed yet.
I think these are all there now.
They're all been drilled or whatever? All that's
Yeah.
been,
Mm-hmm.
okay. All right. And so what, if it's instrumented, what is the monitoring involved?
if it's instrumented, it really depends. I think would be good to eventually go out once per year at least. If it's instrumented with telemetry, it means that every day you get the data on your computer. If it is instrumented without telemetry, you have to send somebody out to physically download the data from the pressure transducer. So if there is a pressure transducer without telemetry, I would say you need to still go out twice per year, because you don't want to lose eventually. If something breaks, you don't want to lose too many data. For the telemetry wells, I have to say we try to go out maybe once per year, just to take one manual measurement that helps us with calibration, just to double check that things are working. So once they are instrumented with telemetry, I would say we are talking about really eventually once per year.
So it would seem that, like, for the instrumented wells, the data is accumulated, and then it's extracted if it's not telemetry. So quarterly would certainly be often enough for that, unless you need the data on a monthly basis. Would that be true? Okay.
Yes.
So I know the cost for the 10 instrumented wells does increase the proposal, but I think if we felt that the monthly monitoring was a good idea, it would be good to do it on the wells that were not instrumented. But we wouldn't necessarily need monthly monitoring. Quarterly monitoring would be more than enough on what would be adequate on the instrumented wells. We wouldn't lose any data that way, but we would have to spend less money. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, what I was discussing this morning, if we can even decide and go right away onto let's install continuous data right now, but there is an upfront cost that maybe it's not some money for some more instruments is there, so we will work on it in the spring. So maybe 3 or 4 more instruments will be covered through the grant that we have right now, but again, there is also, it's not only the money upfront, it's also finding all the people available, the landowner access, all these things. So my suggestion might be, maybe we can, if you guys can agree on approving the monthly monitoring with the understanding that we'll try as much as possible to move quickly to our continuous monitoring, and then you will revisit. So that's something that, and I see your point that actually, if you approve this one, for example, and then in 6 months we have more data that are already continuous, maybe the cost will reduce a little bit in terms of how many times you have to go out, but still, you still need somebody that goes out to double check every once in a while. So, and anyway, you will have a little bit more upfront cost for paying for the instrument. So I think at the end, it might be approving something like this with a little caveat that says we will work toward instrumenting continuously as many wells as possible. And we will maybe you guys can revisit how the budget looks like depending on how quick we move toward continuous data.
So what I'm hearing and I'm supporting is we need the data. We need monthly data, at least in the early stages of this thing, to get a better picture of what we have and where we need to focus our efforts going forward. And our objective is to get as much continuous instrumentation as possible, but to recognizing its costs, to try to use acquire grants that would support this, to move towards more and more instrumentation. And as we get instrumentation, of course, the necessity to visit it is reduced. And it looks like the RCD program is basically a time and materials type program. So those costs would just be sort of shifted gradually around. So I'm good with all that.
Laura, what is the cost of instrumentation of a well?
So the instrument itself, if we want the telemetry, we are looking into 2,000 per well, including the telemetry. And then installation, it depends, might be very quick, might take a little bit longer. But anyway, installation and the cost of the instrument is a one-time cost. Let's say that maybe something like 3,000 per well for installing and buying the instrument. Something like that, 3,000 to 3,500. It depends on also how deep the groundwater is, because you pay for the cables. So if it's really deep, you pay more. If it's very shallow, you pay less.
Mhm.
But maybe 3,500 might be a good average, just to give you an idea. And that includes the labor for installing and setting it up. And then the website for downloading the data, we have it already set up, so there is no cost for that. The data just go online automatically.
Mhm. Okay, so you discussed this with the technical advisory committee,
Yeah,
and did they have any recommendations?
I think Beth is there. I can say that the recommendation is to move as much as possible to our continuous, but I let Beth chime in.
Mhm.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, Beth Salamone, I'm the general manager of the Russian River Flood Control District and the chair of the Technical Advisory Committee. We did discuss this at our meeting this morning, and there was consensus with no objections to moving ahead with the way that Laura has outlined this, hoping to move towards continuous data collection.
Okay, so at this point, we don't actually have to make any decision on this, but what is the pleasure of the group?
A couple of comments I want to add to the conversation. First of all, Laura, hopefully it's a simple question. In our groundwater elevation monitoring network, in chapter 3 of our plan, we say there are 25 wells plus the 10 TSS. And this proposal here only identifies 16 wells plus the 10 TSS. So I'm confused. Maybe the 10 TSS are part of the 26, or can you answer that off the cuff?
Because the TSS wells are kind of, they come separately. They already come with the continuous data covered. So they don't need to be further, they are kind of coming together with DWR service. So
Well,
we
then
don't
how
have
many
to pay for
wells,
those instruments.
how many wells are there in our groundwater elevation network? Does this proposal cover them all? It seems to be 11 short.
I think it's no, so there are the TSS wells, then there are some other wells that DWR is monitoring, doesn't matter what, which are the 4 that that we have for longer time, and that's not gonna go away. And then I think the idea is that we highlighted a subset for going into more frequent measurements, but some others, the CASGEM network was larger. So we can keep a larger network for twice per year measurements, but then have a smaller network for more frequent data.
I should interject here that effective this spring, well, actually effective next month, we're not going to, we were contracted only to do the smaller subset from here on out.
Yeah.
So the CASGEM monitoring, which has been 42 wells, I just finished the monitoring, but that larger contingent will not be part of the future, at least at the moment, is not contracted for monitoring in the future, just the smaller subset.
Deborah, how many are in that smaller subset?
Well, I am gathering data on 16.
And Laura, does that cover our obligations that we set forth in our plan? So
yeah,
we should think of it as 16
also,
plus 10.
It's the 16 plus the TSS plus the one that we already installed with continuous data, and plus the DWR wells. I can double check and recheck again the numbers. Amir, did I miss something?
No, I just checked. So the only confusion is that 25 is a total number of wells, including the TSS wells, and we don't have 10 TSS wells. So it's 25 wells. We have TSS wells that will be instrumented, and we instrumented 3 by now, and we're hoping to instrument more. So the rest that remain are the ones that Deborah is collecting information on.
That makes sense. Okay.
Thanks, Amir.
All right, a couple other observations here. We don't, as an organization, yet have an approved budget, and we need to move towards that as soon as we can. But adding more and more of these either monthly or continuous monitoring is certainly not in our draft budget. And just taking these numbers here, this would be adding, looks like about $30,000 to our annual budget. And so any decision that we make on whether we're moving towards more frequent or even continuous monitoring needs to have an exact, or at least a pretty good budget number attached, so we know what we're deciding on. Second observation is when it does come time to sign a contract, it's important to me that these be official requests for proposals, and we solicit bids from multiple entities to make sure that that we're fulfilling our financial responsibilities to the people who are paying the bills.
I have a couple of things that I would like to add or respond to. I guess the first is I may have misspoken a little bit that no decisions need to be made, because I believe, probably Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, but you do need some direction on what to put in the GSP. Although we don't actually need to enter into a contract at this point, we do probably need a commitment one way or the other in terms of what our monitoring is going to be for the work that LWA is doing. Also, so we do have an approved budget for this year, Zach, which was a very sort of basic operating budget, which we've been amending as the year goes on and as decisions are made. And the JPA requires that every year prior to July 1st, we adopt a budget for the following year. So that'll be done more probably in May or June for each coming year. So the budget that we had, that 5-year sort of look ahead, wasn't something that we would actually adopt. It was more for planning purposes and to determine the amount of funding that was needed. And we did include about $60,000 for monitoring each year. We included a little bit more up front. I think it was 50 for the first year and then 60 going forward. Just thinking that there's sometimes there's more upfront costs like instrumentation or coordination with well owners, things like that. So that's why we did 50 the first year, but that's only for a half a year. So it's it's actually more than in the years to follow. But that's the amount that we've sort of built into our plan. That does include stream gauge monitoring and water quality monitoring as well, although those don't have as large of a cost because most of our water quality monitoring is coming from entities who already do water quality monitoring. And the stream gauge monitoring, well, at least for this year, is partially covered, I believe, by the CLSI grant. So those are just some things to note.
Let me repeat, make sure I understood that correctly. So the 5-year draft budget, again, not approved, but that would start on July 1 of 2022. That would be the beginning of year 1 of that budget.
Well, year 1 was actually from January to June. So it was year 1 actually only counted as half of a year. It was close to the costs of the years after that because of the fact that in a lot of the categories there were upfront costs that would cost almost as much as a whole year in the years to follow.
I'm not sure we invoiced everyone correctly if that 220,000 for year 1 was only a 6-month number. Aren't we invoicing people once a year?
Yes. So what we did was we got the 5-year number and we divided that by the 5 years. So it's an average over the 5 years because none of those were built in. So, you know, any funds that are unspent will carry over into the following year. So instead of trying to have each board, you know, revise the amount every year, we just did an average, and then so that it would be the same amount annually to make it easier for the boards to plan.
And then your observation on the money for monitoring. Right now, we were kind of guesstimating 50,000, but that was for both the elevation network, our groundwater quality network, and our stream flow gauging network.
Yes.
And of all three of those, I think we had a discussion recognizing that probably the stream flow gauging network may end up being more pricey than we had budgeted.
Possibly, I don't have any expertise on that. I think there were some differing opinions on what it might actually cost. But I do think that the number we came up with was our best guess based on the information we had available.
And really for the stream gauge, we are the gauges are already installed, and you know, things may go bad. I understand that, but we should have I mean, for the first year we should really cover it through the grant. So it's basically, imagine that I think we discussed this. If some of the money that you eventually will put into you guys will put into monitoring is also money that eventually will pile up if something happens down the road. So we will try to do as much as possible with the grant till April, and really use it up and help you out with that. So it might be that out of the 50,000 for the first year, you will use only 25. I don't know, just guessing. But then those 25 can be piled up for emergency down the road.
Yeah, we needed to account for, you know, any sort of vandalism or maintenance or anything like that as well.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And then if I understand this correctly.
Sorry, Zach.
Oh, I don't want to interrupt you. You're the one who has real info.
Oh, no. I was just saying that we already have the vandalism. Sorry, now it's you.
So it sounds like 10 out of 25 of our elevation wells are already installed with continuous monitoring or are funded already to be continuously monitored. And so the only real question is for this remaining 15 or 16 wells, and a few of those already have continuous in them as well, whether or not we're going to upgrade the rest of the network to continuous monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're
where
close
we
to
are,
half already.
Zach, I would just that the 10 might be the cap number. So we are now at 3. We have 5 DWR wells that are scheduled to be instrumented. So that would be 8. We're pretty sure we're gonna instrument a nested well in Millview if we can. So that kind of puts us in around the 10 number because the nested one has to be 3 screens that we want to instrument.
So those 10 TSS wells don't already have continuous or not slated necessarily to get continuous?
Oh,
No,
sorry.
they will have continuous.
I misspoke. So one of them at least is nested. So five actual wells. I think one of them is nested well, so that would be increased. So we might be over 10. So I misspoke about that. Sorry.
I think aren't 2 of them nested? Or is it just 1?
So one of them is conditional for them to go out and see if they can, but one of them is certain that is nested. So maybe it might end up be 2 of them. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can kind of clarify, Amir, a little bit the language about the fact that these TSS wells, even if it's they are since 3 years in the making. We don't have all of them yet. So that's the plan. We can change that a little bit. But anyway, the TSS well comes with instruments. So that's for sure.
But they're all funded. We have 10 of those.
Yeah.
They're all funded. Whether or not they're complete yet, it's a separate question.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Other questions or comments from board members?
I guess I have a question on the comment Zach made about the need for an RFP for this monthly monitoring. Are RFPs free, or do we have to spend money to get them, do them?
They cost, well, they take staff time, which it equals money, yes.
So I'm just wondering, you know, who's out there who does this sort of thing that would be wanting to respond beyond the RCD, which has been doing it for an extended period of time? And would this be cost effective?
Well, don't we have to draw up a proposal on what we're asking people to do anyway, and whether or not it's packaged as an RFP or not? We still have to define what the scope of the work is.
Yeah, we do.
And Al, I can think of some local engineering firms that may be curious about this. And Laurel Marcus has shown up in front of this board and said explicitly that she would like an opportunity to participate if there were opportunities there. So there's already a couple other folks who might be candidates. I can't speak to their exact level of interest though.
So one thing to take into consideration, and you know, the reason why the county has always done it through an exception to bid, is that RCD does have established relationships and agreements with landowners, and switching the monitoring entity could create a lot more work and probably needed funds to do that work. So I think that probably an exception to bid could be warranted, but it's up to the board. If the board decides that they would not like to go that direction, then that's fine too.
Right, so we have a question or comment from Beth.
Yes, thanks, Glenn. To this point, some things for the board to consider when making your decision. As Amber laid out, the RCD has long-standing relationships with the property owners. That is a very precious relationship. It took a lot of effort and trust to develop. And I've heard from the agricultural community specifically, even earlier today, any monitoring has to be from a very trusted source, and RCD is already trusted in that way. Secondly, an RFP does take time to develop and go out. There are longer deadlines for responses, and I believe, Deborah, Amber, you can correct me, that we need this to begin in January of 2022. Is that correct?
So we currently have a contract just for spring monitoring.
Right.
So if that was the plan to begin it in January, then yes, that would need to happen.
And Deborah, that's what we spoke about, right? Is that the CASGIM transition, the county has already indicated, the county's already contracted for the one springtime, and this would be for the other 5 months in the first half of this, the last half of this fiscal year. And the GSA board already, wasn't it last board meeting where they approved to pay the county for that CASGIM? Yes, I hear a nod. I hear a nod. Okay, so what's being asked of the board today is to, instead of just doing the one springtime monitoring that is already scheduled and approved to be paid for by the GSA, that we add 5 more for the second half of this current fiscal year. And would that require a budget adjustment, Amber? I wanted to make sure That was a question I had from following up from Zach's points on the budget.
So I think this was part of the discussion we had at the last meeting, that the county amending the county's contract would push us over the threshold of having to go to the Board of Supervisors. So I think we talked about several different options. One was authorizing a budget adjustment and recommending to the board to amend the RCD contract that the county has. Two was for the GSA to contract directly for those other 5 months. And I think we may have even discussed doing it through your contract, Beth.
Right. So I would say priority wise, like the way that I would prioritize that would be for the GSA to contract directly with RCD for those 5 months. And the second option would be for the flood control district to be the intermediary. If that second option is the option that the board prefers, if they agree to go forward with this, the flood control district would need to know almost immediately so that we could approve that at our December board meeting to have everything lined up for January. Thank you.
So does that mean there's a scenario here where that $13,000 emergency monitoring that we approved last time or 2 meetings ago actually comes back because it's replaced by this?
No, so there was the $16,000 emergency monitoring, which was for this fall. So that will go through December. And then the 13,000 was for the migration of the CASGIM wells from the CASGIM system to the Sigma system, because there's work involved there. And then performing the spring monitoring, which is just once. So we're talking about adding just another 5 months of monitoring on top of that through one of these contracting options.
Right, but these all say.
So I think these were for full years. These estimates that Deborah, I believe these are for a full year of monitoring, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Zach, you muted yourself in your last comment. We didn't hear.
Yeah, I try to stay on perpetual mute, but okay, so we would have to take the numbers that are in front of us and prorate them, maybe divide them by about a half to represent 5 months of monitoring, not 12 months.
And Amber, my question was not about a contract amendment, although that was important. It was about the current GSA budget for this fiscal year. Would it accommodate for this additional monitoring, or would the GSA board need to consider a budget adjustment for this fiscal year?
So we would need to do a budget adjustment. This monitoring is within the planned budget. You could say that 5-year budget, that would not need to be amended. It easily fits
Right.
into that. Our actual annual budget,
Adopted budget.
that's been adopted for this year, yes, would need to be amended. But that's, we could bring that back as an item at the next board, at the December board meeting. It's not a big deal.
Devin,
So just a point of clarification, I think I'm kind of getting overlap from the TAC meeting this morning. So this proposal is to take 16 wells, correct, Deborah, from the existing CASGIM program, go from quarterly to monthly, not necessarily going to continuous. Because the question I brought up this morning was if there's a continuous conversation to be had, not all property owners may be agreeable to that. And that would be something to consider as well. In this process, where they may be okay with monthly versus continuous. So I just wanted to get a clarification on that.
well, that would be something that we'd have to probably work out arrangements or agreements with individual well owners. If we switch how they're being monitored, they need to know and they need to agree to it.
But this, to answer your question, Devin, I think this proposal that we have in front of the board is to just switch from, because right now monitoring is only planned to be semi-annually, so twice a year. So these are alternatives to switch to either quarterly or monthly from semi-annually.
For a subset of wells, because the other 10 plus maybe another 1 or 2, if my math's correct, are already continuous or budgeted to be continuous.
I think Paul has his hand up. Paul.
Thank you very much. I had a quick question. So I'm obviously coming in late to the whole conversation. Sustainable groundwater monitoring is looking for primarily, is there any overdraft? And it's hard to see how continuous monitoring is going to point that out as a snapshot in time. I don't mean to be rude or anything, but I mean, yearly is what Lake County does. Quarterly sounds very nice. Monthly sounds okay. You do have RCD and you do have flood control that have the relationships. This is not a research project for the university or even for the valley. It's to monitor sustainable groundwater use by the valley. And it doesn't change very quickly. 15-minute instrumentation seems overkill. Thank you.
Can I answer? So I think we need to remember that what we need here is understanding surface water, groundwater interactions, and those change every time. So that's the reason why we are talking about that. I totally agree with you. If it's just for showing overdraft that it's not happening, you don't need it. But I think we discussed a lot about what's going on with our model and the fact that, for example, we don't have the data to fully understand the relationship between the Russian River and the groundwater, or the tributaries and the groundwater. And we can also share some of the continuous data that we collected exactly for this purpose of surface water, groundwater in other basins. They really tell you a story that you cannot tell with just twice per year data. So we need to keep that in mind. We are not talking about overdraft. We never talked about the overdraft here. Our problem is really trying to understand the seasonality. And if we don't have any data for the summertime, it's really difficult for us to really figure out how this relationship between the surface water and the groundwater is happening and changing. So that's our reasoning. So I totally agree with you about the overdraft, but this is not an overdrafted basin.
The Sustainability Act does not demand that you figure out the relationship between the river and the groundwater. It demands that you figure out groundwater sustainable drafting.
No, you're not right.
Yeah, but we need to we need to demonstrate that the groundwater use doesn't have any impact on other beneficial users, and the river is the surface water is one of the beneficial users, and the ecosystems that are around the surface water. So one of the indicators that we need to demonstrate, and that's probably the one that we discussed the most with this group and with the TAC, is really understanding surface water, groundwater interaction.
And when we're continuously monitoring, of course, that's done by instrumentation. So in terms of its labor input, it's not huge, correct? It's just it's man data. So.
As I said, Glenn, there will be an upfront cost, but then less money involved later. So I would say probably at the end of the day, it's gonna balance out between monthly measurements for 5 years, let's say, and then moving from monthly to continuous over the next few years. Understanding what Devon was saying, because I totally agree, Devon, that getting all the stakeholder on board is not that easy.
Yeah, Amira, you have a comment or a question?
I just had two clarifying comments. So the 16 wells that Zach mentioned, everybody mentions, that would be our cap number for these monitorings as we instrument, like Laura mentioned, during the next 5-6 months. And whatever we instrument would reduce that number for future monitoring. The other thing I wanted to mention is if we decide on monthly measurements and we put it in the GSP, even if we instrument some of these wells they're still going to be reported in a monthly way. So although we receive the data as continuous in annual reports and official reports that we put out, a monthly value will be reported. So it's not that we're committed. The only ones that are committed to have available data for continuous measurement are the ones that DWR is funding.
I'd be pretty concerned about updating our plan to commit us to a higher level of monitoring. I don't mind doing more monitoring than we're committed to, but it'd be a big deal if we lock ourselves in.
So, all right, so again, to understand what we need to do today, do we need to take action on this? Amber?
I do think after, having this discussion that there needs to be some sort of direction. We don't really have anything to take action on, but I do think there needs to be direction to staff on what we need to bring back at the next meeting. If anything, if the board wishes to increase the monitoring.
So let me see if I can summarize a little bit. We like data. We'd like to have more of it because it would help improve the precision in our model as it goes to groundwater and surface interactions. So that's a plus. The minus is more expense and also getting agreements from our cooperators to allow continuous monitoring. And is there something else that I'm missing that's in the negative column or the positive? So with that in mind, what would the group like to do? What is a recommendation for staff to pursue, or what's our direction?
Could I speak? This is Al.
Sure.
Well, I support monthly monitoring on the wells that are not instrumented and quarterly monitoring on instrumented wells. And I support that for at least one full cycle of water, a water year, and then see where we stand.
Al, could you repeat that? You may have said it backwards. You said only quarterly on instrumented wells?
Yeah.
You got monthly there?
Monthly on the wells that are not instrumented, and on the 16 CASGEM wells, and any instrumented wells would be quarterly, basically to check and make sure, get the data and make sure that it's still there.
Oh, because you're assuming it's not hooked up with telemetry.
Right. If it's telemetry, then no, you don't need to even visit it because it's either working or it isn't. It'd be that once a year for.
Yeah, I think so far we have telemetry in all what we installed, so that's I think probably we can keep going with that. But yeah, so maybe a good average might be to say twice per year for the one that are instrumented. So it's kind of an average between the one with telemetry and something that eventually would be without telemetry. So kind of finding the balance in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to spend time and money doing something that doesn't have a direct benefit. But I do believe there's a direct benefit to monthly monitoring on wells that have no other way to determine what's there.
Okay.
And I really feel like the RCD should be the way that we do this, at least in this initial period, because of all the reasons stated earlier.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you as well, but any other opinions on that? Amber, are we starting some kind of disaster if we don't go out to bid on this?
No, I don't. The county for many years has contracted through exceptions to bid for all the reasons discussed earlier, and I think it's totally warranted in this case.
And I also feel kind of like RCD is long-term partner with the county, and we have good relations with them, and they're very dependable at what they do. So I almost feel like they're, you know, how do we put it, an adjunct department to Mendocino County. So I'm very comfortable working with them. Do any of the other board members want to weigh in?
I still feel like I'm kind of blind on the budgetary implications here. We threw a
So
lot of
why don't,
numbers around.
sure, why don't we direct staff to work up the proposal that Al just said? In addition to that, we have to think about the stream gauges as well. So let's not forget them. And then bring that back for our next meeting. Would that work, Amber?
Yeah, is there a preferred method of contracting in terms of the GSA contracting directly with RCD for those 5 additional months, or having the Russian River Flood Control amend their contract?
What are the financial implications for us?
I mean, either way, I don't think it'll change the cost. That may be more of a question for Beth in terms of other complications to amending your contract. You know, sometimes it's easier to amend a contract that exists already, although in our case, it would require board approval, so it's not necessarily easier.
Well, this is the kind of thing that probably would go on a consent agenda, which isn't difficult, other than for you to write the agenda item. That's the only thing that takes a little bit of work.
Yeah, it's more about, it takes a long time to get things on the county's agenda. The timing is usually the difficult thing.
Yeah, well, I can pressure people if we need it in a hurry. The consent agenda is not so hard to get things on. It's when you have to physically talk that and have discussions that's really the big problem. Beth, you want to weigh in?
I'd like to defer to Al first as my representative, if that's all right.
All right. I would prefer the GSA contract directly because that's the future. The flood control stepped in just to keep things moving, but I don't want the flood control to be the grease on the wheels here. I think we need to manage things here where we are.
I'm inclined to agree with you. Is that all right with you, Beth?
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you, Al. Well put, and well, thank you for the support. I think, yes, if the GSA board is going to move forward with monthly monitoring, which is my recommendation, then let's get the contract started. You know, it's going to have to be done eventually anyway. And if there is concern about doing an exception to bid, I would recommend that exception to bid be with a stopgap, you know, like a deadline, and then the GSA board could go to RFP for future monitoring work if they felt that need. So there could be a you know, like Al said, 1 year's worth of data collection. I would clarify that year because there's a couple things happening here. There's fiscal year, and then there's calendar year. And I too, along with Zach, am getting a little bit confused about the budgetary issues and the expenditures and the contract periods and all that sort of thing. So I think in the agenda item that would be brought back in December, it would clarify you know, the contract between who the contract is between with RCD and how long, and if there was an interest in going to RFP.
Also, if I'm not mistaken, isn't the fiscal year and a water year happen to be the same?
No, the water year
No.
is November 1st.
Oh, water years go start in November.
That's a different year.
Yeah,
And then the federal fiscal is different as well.
I think for me, all this monitoring stuff, for me, I think in terms of, you know, from summer to, well, a water year, because that's the cycle. So that's where I'm going to keep my mind on any of this stuff that we do.
Maybe I could take Beth's observation, push it a teeny bit more. If next time we look at this issue, maybe we can just look at it to the completion of the current fiscal year and then get on a 12-month cycle from that point forward.
Okay.
So we could ask Deborah to update the cost just to fulfill this fiscal year through June and do a contract for that, which under that, so the JPA specifies that the GSA will follow county purchasing policy, which doesn't require an exception to bid under 25,000. So if we're only talking about 5 months, then likely that would be under 25,000 anyways. So the RFP is a moot point. And then in the spring, we can discuss it further about how to move forward from July on.
Yes.
That sound good? So let me just clarify. So that was monthly for the 16 Cash Gym wells. And what was that? Do we say 2 times a year or quarterly for the other wells? What was the consensus there?
I had said quarterly, if simply because somebody should look at it once every quarter to make sure it's still functioning.
Well, if we have telemetry, we'll know whether or not it's functioning, right?
Yeah, the telemetry was like once a year, right?
Well, telemetry would probably be none, but I think Al, your suggestion was quarterly if it goes to a data logger and the data logger needs to be downloaded.
Exactly.
Amber, do you feel like you have enough direction?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
And just because we need to wrap this up in the GSP anyway, what do you think if we keep the language that we have right now, which is quarterly data, but we say that the GSA is looking into options for more frequent monitoring if possible, and we provide some of these options without committing to anything? What do you think? Because we need to wrap it up in a way.
That sounds wise.
So
We have
okay.
Cash Gym field crews, we have twice per year now in the plan. So it's less than
yeah,
30.
so I think it looks like probably we can go into the quarterly, and which would already help, but then or maybe keep it twice per year, but say that the GSA is looking into option as funding are available for more frequent data collection. I mean, there is already these 6 months or 1 year, whatever, 6 months, 5 months of monthly monitoring that we can mention, Amir. I'm just trying to find we'll try to find a language that doesn't make you commit to too much, but says that you are already thinking about it.
Okay.
Without a signature at the end.
I'm happy to think about anything and commit to as little as possible.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. So in the interest of time, we probably better be moving on to our next agenda item. If Amber feels that she has clear direction. Okay, good. So the next item is discussion and possible direction to staff regarding the Department of Water Resources Urban and Multi-Benefit Drought Relief Grant Program. So who is handling this?
I can introduce this. So this is a funding source that just recently became available, and the county is putting together, or will be putting together, an application for a countywide strategic plan, essentially a water strategic plan. And we had put together a list. The GSA had put together a list of possible projects. We sent off the letter for the emergency drought funding this summer, and it's possible that some of those projects could be eligible under this grant. We're already in the second round. The rounds are happening very quickly. We're in the second round, and it's if the GSA did want to pursue some of these projects, likely we couldn't get an application in until the third round. if the board did want to, we would need to likely contract with LWA to prepare a grant application for us. And so we were just bringing this forward as a discussion item to see if there was any interest in pursuing this, or if the board prefers to wait until next fall to apply for funding for these projects. When because there should be the Sigma implementation funds should be available next fall.
Well, so what are critical issues right now that we need to address that we could apply grant funding for?
Laura, did you answer that question at all? You probably know better than I do.
Yeah. So, Glenn, this multi-benefit funding, I just reached out to DWR this morning and got a few information. For example, some ideas of recharge projects, upstream storage, things that can benefit the groundwater also in the short term, because we know Ukiah, the benefit can be kind of a short term because your aquifer is responding pretty quickly. Those can be part of this multi-benefit project. Other ideas that have been given are, that one of the big items for the GSP is really looking into impacts on human rights to water. So everybody has the right to have drinking water in their tap if they are on a domestic well, for example. And so looking into possible wells that are at risk, and think about projects that can help either deepening the wells or drilling new wells so that there will be no emergency in terms of a future drought if a specific area goes too low for some reason, so you don't have too many people that are going to have a dry domestic well, for example. So there are a lot of opportunities in the grant itself. Also, if we can also, it's also possible to put in a request for example, improving water distribution systems. If somebody in the GSA is interested in that, because somebody has asked for that because there were too many leaks, for example, or drilling a backup wells that can be used in case of emergency. These funds can cover pretty much all these different projects. So the reason why the Sigma group is suggesting the GSA to go out after this funding is because the new implementation funding will not be available until at some point in 2023, because the proposal is due next fall. So the implementation funding will be available for the GSA, let's say summer 2023. So what they have suggested is for the GSA to go after as much as possible these very quick drought emergency funding. These drought emergency funding, as Amber said, they are first come, first serve. So it's not that it's not just the quality of the proposal. For sure, there is something about the quality, but it's a question of being quick on putting them down, because they started, the first batch was in November, the second batch will be in December. So they really evaluate as they get them. So they are a quick turnaround.
Okay. Beth, you want to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I just, when you're considering how to prioritize potential projects, every discussion, every webinar, every meeting that I have that involves state water board or DWR representatives, data. That's what is being stressed as the important component when talking about groundwater sustainability. So just keep that in mind. We've just gone through this big discussion about drought monitoring, right? The monthly monitoring, data collection. That's where we're going to move forward. And then the second one is outreach and education. Trying to interpret that data, present that data to the public in a way that educates them on the importance of groundwater sustainability and encourages them to build a relationship with the process and the water, and become better represented in the process. And actually, let me add one more. The third one is the managed aquifer recharge, which you may have heard of as FloodMAR or AgMAR. That can be done in several different ways.
So am I correct? We're being advised here that there's high probability of getting grant money if we were to move quickly? Is that kind of the bottom line here?
Yes, that's what
Yes.
I'm. Mhm.
And has the TAC or Laura or even Beth, you guys have a favorite project that you think would be a candidate to pitch right now?
It's a good question, Zach. I think one of the things that we need to consider, that I would suggest to the GSA board, whatever direction you give staff and the TAC, is that we need to coordinate with not only GSA and TAC members, but with other stakeholders in the community, so that we are collectively applying for things, so we're not overlapping and stepping on each other's toes. If you get my drift. So if somebody's already applying for something, making sure that we're a little more coordinated. So that might be just sort of a subgroup of interested folks jumping on a Zoom call and kind of sorting out some things.
Mhm.
But yeah, those three things I mentioned. And the thing about it is, I think it's a $2 million minimum. Is that right? You nod your head. Yeah, I see nodding heads. So you're talking about bundling. You could bundle quite a few things in that grant application.
Mm-hmm.
You could bundle data. Any kind of project can have an outreach component, and it can have a data collection component. Those are just two ways to go forward. And it can also be phased, so you can have a component of developing the next phase.
So if we were to put together an aquifer recharge project, grabbing that out of our chapter 4 and package it up pretty, we could even say things like we want to evaluate the efficacy of this project with continuous well monitoring and pay for the telemetry and continuous monitoring that we just spent an hour talking about, worrying about the cost.
That's the goal, Zach. That's why I'm saying that, at the end we need that will come through some of the projects that anyway are mentioned in the GSP. The project needs to be demonstrated. How do you demonstrate the benefit of a project? Is with data. The data can be the same that are then used for the annual report.
But that
Yeah.
seems like something worth going after, is trying to get as much automated telemetry on our monitoring systems as possible, so that we generate data. See, Paul has his hand raised.
I would hope that the board would keep focused on what your primary objective is, rather than reaching out for future possibilities. Conjunctive use has kind of come and gone with the purple pipe. There's no mandate for you to do groundwater recharge at this time, because you haven't demonstrated that there's any overdraft. I think you should just remain focused on what your objective is now for monitoring needs.
So I'm concerned because of we don't have 100% reliability of the Potter Valley project in the future. So that's where groundwater recharge might be more important, given the changes of hydrological conditions.
I would agree with you, Glenn, but you've jumped ahead and you don't know if the Potter Valley project is gone yet.
We don't, but I think sometimes it's a good idea to be thinking about it. And certainly in our GSP, we do have discussions about recharge and the need to recharge the aquifer, given our climate uncertainty. Correct, Laura?
You might think about purple pipe phase 2 or 3 coming up.
Yeah, all those are possibilities.
So on this topic, I think we should move forward on it. The one thing that where Beth was mentioning about coordination, I think that's really important that we have sort of partners. I know the CLSI is a partner in some respects on things we do or need to do in their grant writing, and we'll have grant writing that Larry Walker Associates will be possibly participating in writing. And I know the RCD writes grants. And last meeting, we talked about looking for a consultant to perform administrative duties. I'm not sure what that exactly was, but what I'm concerned about, I guess, is that we don't have like the boss or whatever, you know, we don't have the one person that has the responsibility of coordinating things, making sure that you know all this stuff is happening. I think we've depended on the county staff and Larry Walker to get us this far, but we were talking about needing to get somebody to take us in the future. Did we make any progress on that?
I have started working on the RFP. Unfortunately, I didn't get as far as I had hoped because of other priorities, but it's definitely still high on my to-do list in the coming days, because I think it's very important, especially if we think we're going to take on projects such as this and grants such as this.
Yeah, so that is my main concern, is that there is someone who is looking at all the different ways that things interact with our GSA and GSP, and making sure that there's some coordination and rational distribution of effort, so we don't have overlapping effort and just, you know, confusing ourselves.
There is the possibility we will have a Mendocino County Water Agency that's, you know, funded properly. We're entering into a contract with GEI consultants to figure out the configuration and how to actually pay for a more robust Mendocino County Water Agency, because right now it's kind of operated out of the kindness of the Department of Transportation. And we need to kind of improve our capacity as a county to deal with all the complex subjects, which right now we have kind of cobbled together coalition that's pretty effective, but it's really not the best way to do business in the long run, because we don't have you know, a permanent, well-staffed, functioning organization to do these things. So that's kind of a long-term goal for the county, certainly. Beth, you have something you'd like to say?
Yeah, I had a question for Amber. You mentioned we're in phase 2 and there's a phase 3 for this grant application. Do you have approximate dates on that? I thought in your staff report it says something about December 17th.
That's the due date for phase 2. I don't think they've actually, I couldn't find a due date for phase 3 yet. I think it says that future dates will be announced later.
Okay, because that's what I'm thinking is moving
monthly.
Yeah, moving forward with the GS, you know, addressing Al's concerns, it does make sense to have a more coordinated effort administratively from the GSA, which would be the GSA administrator. And perhaps that would line up well if resources were put towards obtaining the GSA administrator first, rather than splitting the attention between that and trying to develop the grant application. Maybe we could get someone on board sooner rather than later, and then that phase 3 could be the goal. And I love a good ad hoc committee. I would also throw that out on the table that, that might be something worth thinking about too.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, or at least having a workshop where we kind of nimbly and quickly lay our cards out on the table about what grants are being applied for by who. So we sort of know what's going on. I might also throw in here right now too, so we signed on under under my signature to a grant with the Sonoma County Water Agency, who have also applied with a multi-benefit, the urban multi-benefit program to look at some of the impacts of the Potter Valley project on groundwater sustainability, among other things. So because we're having such a hard time finding money, so that is something that was also in the works, coming from our partners in Sonoma County and our two basin solution.
Are there any other entities out there applying for projects in Mendocino County that we should just be throwing our weight behind instead of rushing to put something together ourselves? Beth, you hinted about the need for coordination. Are you aware of anyone else who's looking at applying for these types of things?
Yeah, I think there are several entities. I don't know that any are fully developing their grant applications at the moment. But you know, as far as what projects the GSA might be interested in doing, don't forget CLSI with their watershed coordinator grant. Part of that grant is they're able to put together one grant application during that 3-year period. So that's anything we talk about moving forward. We absolutely want to have the watershed coordinator part of that discussion. And you know, we have a list of PMAs. That's what they're there for. Is, you know, we've spent many, you know, hours developing those project and management actions that are in the GSP for this very opportunity. So that's worth looking at those as well. But yeah, to Zach's point, pulling together representatives to discuss that is a good idea.
Maybe I think what I can add, we had the Redwood Valley, I don't remember the name, Amir knows, they reached out to us. And if they go after a project the way I see it and the way it happened in other basins, it might be that we can enlarge a little bit what they're going after and include some of what we have in our GSP into their effort. So that's something that I see as very easy, because they have a concrete need and they can go after a different type of funding. They can go through after the small community drought funding, which is even easier than the multi-benefit. So if you think it's a good idea, Amir already talked to them, and we said that we can help out providing ideas, but that's something that we could do. We could bundle something which is more GSP related, at least for the Redwood Valley area, into that specific effort. And really, this is what is happening everywhere. It's not that if somebody has a specific need, we have been suggested just to try to see if we can bundle some of the GSP need into that other proposal. So that's something we can look after, and we can discuss with the Redwood Valley again and see what's their plan. I think they need some support for writing, but again, these smaller community, the small community funding are really not so extremely complicated. They're even easier than the multi-benefit. So it's really not a big effort. So probably we can just take pieces from the GSP and use them as much as possible. So just to tell you, that's what we are aware of beside the effort from the county. And that might be kind of a low-hanging fruit for Redwood Valley.
Beth, comment, question?
Yeah, thank you. So exactly what Laura's saying. So, you know, but for anyone who is applying for these grants, looking for opportunity, you know, this is where the outreach is really important because we don't have a dedicated GSA administrator. For Amber's, you know, doing her best. She's doing a great job, but and Michael as well. But we all need to take on that responsibility and be in touch with our constituency and stakeholders and colleagues to find out what's going on. Because if Redwood Valley, for example, submits an application, they could implement some of the things, they could add some of the things that we need for our GSP implementation. and in coordination could receive a GSA support letter, etc. So it's more than just the GSA applying for grants. It's really about all this outreach to get involved with everyone else. And the county, in addition to participating in the GSA, the Mendocino County Water Agency, the current consultant Josh Metz has been, we've had, and the RCD is working on this as well. We've had funding workshops. There's potential for support in helping small water purveyors develop these. So there's a lot of information on the county website for the Drought, the Mendocino County Water Agency on this sort of thing. And I encourage everyone to look at that.
Well, so Beth, it sounds like it wouldn't be a bad idea for us to have an ad hoc kind of very quickly to just see who the players are and what we're doing so that we're coordinated. And I think that, I would be happy to work with you and Amber to communicate to everybody what's happening. If there's anybody else who'd like to be on the ad hoc with us, I think that's a good idea.
Glenn, I would ask for the board to consider, or for you as the chair to consider when developing the ad hoc. When we did the funding ad hoc, it really turned out that it was best to have someone, whether, obviously the board members, there can only be a certain amount with Brown Act, but to have representatives from each sector through their staff or board. So there's, again, that transparency and that overarching representation, which I think is really important for our GSA work.
Okay, do you want to work with me on that, and so that we can put this together quickly? And because I think time is of the essence on these grants, so I understand it.
Glenn, do you need a motion to do that, or can that be done informally?
Good question. So
I think you can set up an ad hoc as a board member. As the chair, you can set up an ad hoc.
So Nicole?
If I may, if you would like to do this by direction of the chair, that would be fine for purposes of recording this in the minutes.
Okay, well then by direction of the chair, I'm suggesting a creation of an ad hoc with Elizabeth to be determined, with Beth and Amber, other members to be determined, for the purpose of gathering information on who's applying for grants and coordinating our efforts.
Is there another board member that you want to assign to that ad hoc?
Yeah, is there anybody who would like to serve, who's interested?
I saw Ross's eyebrows lift on this.
No, you didn't.
Do I have to appoint a volunteer?
Well, it doesn't have to have 2 board members, but I mean, I think we need to include Laurel or one of her colleagues from CLSI. And I think because Laurel and Devin are working on project already that they've been in touch with me about, I think we should include Devin and yourself and Amber. And then that leaves someone from, representing IRWA, which could be, I know they have a administrator, Kate, at the, she's been working on the grant project. So she might be someone from the tribes, and perhaps even someone from Sonoma Water Agency. So there's a little bit of coordination, and RCD. They're both on the tab. Those are just thoughts.
That sounds good to me. Okay, well, we'll do that. So that's by my direction. We'll create an ad hoc in consultation with Beth and Amber to make sure the right people are on it. All right, does that conclude this item then? Unless someone has further comment, questions, or... Very well, then we'll move on to director reports. Do directors have anything to report out?
I don't have anything to report, but I do have a question. What happened to the city? Why do we not have anyone sitting on their seat?
I'm sorry, I forgot we should include this, city rep on the ad hoc.
Well, I was thinking more in terms of Director Crane has not been attending, and they don't they haven't put up an alternate or anyone. Is the city?
I believe there is an alternate. It's Mo.
Mo is the county's alternate now.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
I don't know if they, let me see if they appointed an alternate.
Al, if you know anyone who works at the city, maybe you should ping them directly and tell them to step up.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I
they're
mean, I haven't been able to reach Douglas, and I reached out to Sean White earlier, and he said he's unable to attend. I know he was sick for the last meeting, I believe. So I don't.
So Juan Orozco is their alternate.
so
So
maybe
should-
we can get at least one of them to show up next time. I really feel like, like I say, they're a major player, probably the biggest groundwater user. They need to be here.
I agree. I'm happy to reach out to Sage San Giacomo as well if we feel like we're not getting a response. So,
Okay. That's all I got.
okay.
Michael has been, working diligently to make sure that, we reach a quorum and that we have, that we're able to hold the meetings. So maybe if in the future the city can't, or Director Crane can't attend, he can reach out to Juan Orozco about attending.
That sounds good.
Do
Any
we send
thoughts?
out the calendar invite to all the alternates as well, or is it up to the board member to forward it to the alternate?
I send it to the alternates as well.
Super.
And, really alternates, it would be nice if the alternates attended, because if you haven't been at the meetings, it's hard to just sort of pick up in the middle of issues.
Correct.
But unfortunately, everybody's very busy. So.
Well, thankfully, the GSA board meetings are recorded and available on YouTube. And, our tribal representative has also been unable to meet due to work constraints. However, I have heard through other tribal representatives that are coordinating with him that he is watching the meetings on YouTube. So he is staying up to date. But I was going to ask this in public comments, but since this is the subject, I've asked Amber to see what the possibilities are of having the December meeting, which will be the approval of the draft or the GSP for submission, to be a later afternoon, early evening meeting to accommodate folks who work, and also, for the not just the board members, but for the public as well.
Any thoughts on that? We have to choose the day kind of carefully. So like for instance, today I have the Redwood Valley MAC at 5:30. So there's that, and we also have evening meetings for the IWPC. So we have to be sure that we don't conflict with their dates if that's the pleasure of the board. Thoughts?
Next meeting that for the GSA board that we spoke about at the TAC was December 15th, the proposed date. And I had spoken to Laura and Amir as well about the potential of having an evening meeting. The only meeting I have on the books for that evening is the Cal Poly County Water District, but Ross is our OR representative and he's not on that board.
So again, with Redwood Valley MAC.
I think they meet on December 15th.
I don't know what their schedule is, so.
I have it in here. No, they meet on December 8th.
So they're the second Wednesday, right? How do board members feel about that?
I don't love the idea, but the rationale for doing it is strong, and I could certainly do it once on that day without a big deal.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Consultants on board, would that work for you? All right, then we can go ahead and plan on a 5:30 p.m. or what time do you want to go? 5:30 or 6?
It's really the same for us. It's mostly for you, and we're thinking that unless there are tons of comments from you guys, it might not be that long.
Okay, why don't we shoot for 6 o'clock and we'll, let's plan on that, okay? It is kind of a special occasion, so that's what we'll do for us.
Is that officially a happy hour meeting then?
Yes, you can have a glass
Yeah,
of
you
wine
bring
with your
wine.
meeting. Yes. I've done that before for COVID briefings, which happened at 6 p.m. So. All right, so any other public comments on items not on the agenda?
I did want to mention that starting tomorrow, the Department of Water Resources is going to be doing the airborne geophysical studies in the basin. And so we've notified everybody that we possibly can to avoid anybody freaking out about it, to hopefully get the word out there, but I'm sure there'll still be some skeptics. But for us, it's a really good thing. For the GSA, it's a really good thing that they're doing it. So.
Okay, yes. Yeah, there'll be some cannabis growers upset, so I can guarantee you that. Beth?
Now, today at the TAC meeting, we also discussed, the final steps here before we submit the GSP. And the consultants informed us that the final draft GSP is expected to be online probably next week, Thursday, November 18th. So I don't know if there will be an email that comes out for that, but please mark your calendars to, if you haven't already started reading the GSP, you definitely want to begin reading that final version. And that is what you will be asked to approve on December 15th.
Okay.
So you'll have a little less than a month to get through it. And I would think too that if you read it, and you have comments or questions the first week or the second week, sending those in would be much appreciated, before that final approval.
Good point.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. You can reach out to us anytime if you have a question. I think we need to kind of streamline the process right now. So, and do a real easy happy hour on the 15th.
Okay. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, I will declare the meeting adjourned.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Oh.
Yeah.